Outside now, okay?
I'm telling you, I live here. Why would I step outside?
Don't play smart with me. I got a call about suspicious behavior. Now move.
You can see me. I'm in my own doorway. Am I being detained?
I said step outside. Don't make me repeat myself.
Then do your job without breaking the law.
The porch light flicked on at 9:17 p.m., washing the oak door in a pale cone of yellow. A hand hovered near the handle, hesitant, measured. On the other side stood a uniform radio crackling body camera, blinking red. Hadn't he checked the name on the warrant? Hadn't he asked who lived there? He saw skin first in less than 90 seconds. A routine knock became a constitutional violation, recorded, time-stamped, and irreversible. Stay with this story not for outrage, but for understanding. What happens next ends just about one officer or one woman. It is about how power fractures, how the law tests itself, and what accountability actually costs when the cameras don't blink. The street was quiet in the way suburbs get quiet after dinner, not silent, just subdued. Sprinklers clicked off in sequence. A television murmured behind a drawn curtain. At 9:14 p.m., a patrol cruiser rolled past trimmed hedges and mailbox flags, tires whispering over clean asphalt. The dispatcher's voice still echoed faintly in the cabin, flattened by radio compression. Unit 12. Respond, possible suspicious activity. Caller reports unknown individual loitering near residence. No description, no weapons mentioned. Officer Daniel Knox acknowledged with a short double tap of the mic. No follow-up questions, no request for clarification. The call was vague, but vagueness had a way of sharpening itself in his mind. He slowed near a corner house, lights off, engine idling low. Training had taught him patterns, what belonged, what did. He trusted those instincts he always had. Across the street inside the house marked, Judge Evelyn Carter sat at her kitchen table with a legal pad squared neatly to the grain of the wood. Her reading glasses rested halfway down her nose, briefs spread in disciplined stacks. The case warns T-dramatic administrative appeal dry but important. She moved line by line, pen tapping once when a sentence did hold its weight. Outside, the porch light was off. Inside, the room glowed, warm and steady. The cruiser door opened with a soft hydraulic sigh. Knox adjusted his duty belt by habit, thumb brushing the edge of his body camera until it clicked awake. A red light blinked, accent recording. Timestamp burned itself into the corner of the frame. Unsoon 16. He checked the house number, then checked it again. The caller hadn't. He specified this address. Dispatch hadn't TE either, but the street was short. This was the only house with its lights still on. He walked up the driveway, boots measured, posture squared. At the base of the porch steps, he paused, head angled slightly, listening. No raised voices, no movement inside that suggested urgency. He took the steps anyway. The knock was firm, not aggressive, not gentle, the kind designed to command attention. Inside, the sound landed sharp in the quiet. Judge Carter looked up, irritation flickering and settling into caution. She glanced at the clock, late for visitors. She rose, smoothing her cardigan, and moved toward the door with the unhurried confidence of someone accustomed to authority, but careful not to assume it where it did. T belong. She opened the door partway. The camera caught it all, from Knox's chest, wide-angle distortion bending the edges of the frame. A black woman in her late 40s, composed, eyebrows lifting slightly in question. No immediate fear, no apology. Yes, she said. Knox did to introduce himself. His eyes moved past her shoulder, scanning the hallway, the staircase, the glow of the kitchen beyond. Ma'am, I need you to step outside. Her hand stayed on the door. For what reason, officer? The question was calm, polite. It was T resistance, but it was T submission either. Knox's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We received a call about suspicious activity at this residence. She blinked once. I live here. Step outside, he repeated, voice flatter now. The edges harder. We all sorted out. In the space between them, something shifted, not volume, not posture. Assumption. Knox had been trained to control scenes early, to establish dominance before uncertainty could spread. What? He hadn't been trained for what? No academy module had fully prepared him for what? The quiet authority of someone who knew the law. Something lived, not enforced. Judge Carter inhaled slowly. Officer, am I being detained? The body cam caught the pause, half a second, maybe less. Knox hadn't. He expected that question. Not framed that way. Not delivered without tremor. His training manual flickered through his mind. Reasonable suspicion, officer safety, investigative detention. But none of it quite fit. He hadn't seen a crime. He hadn't smelled anything. He hadn't asked a single clarifying question. He said, irritation leaking through. Now I am getting you a lawful order. The word hung there. Lawful, unexamined, unsupported. From inside the house, a phone buzzed softly on the table, unnoticed. Outside, the red light on the camera blinked again, patient and unblinking. Across the street, a neighbor's blinds shifted a fraction, curiosity peeking through. Judge caught her. S voice stayed even. On what legal basis are you ordering me out of my home? Knox exhaled through his nose. His hand drifted closer to his belt, not to the weapon, but enough for the camera to record the motion. Ma'am, Dawn, make this difficult. The sentence was familiar. It had ended many encounters. It had never been questioned until now. She opened the door wider, stepping into the light not to comply, but to confront the moment directly. Officer, she said, each word deliberate. This is my home. If you have probable cause, state it. If not, you are violating my rights. For the first time, Knox felt the ground shift under his certainty. But instead of stopping, instead of reassessing, he did what reflex demanded. His voice rose a notch. Authority asserted itself where justification should have been. Step outside now. The command echoed sharper than the knock that started it. The door stood fully open. The line had been crossed quietly, procedurally, and on camera. The air changed the moment the threshold disappeared. The open door dissolved. The boundary Knox had relied on without realizing it. Inside the house, the sounds were ordinary, an appliance hum, the faint tick of a wall clock, but to him they felt intrusive, like he had stepped into a space he didn't fully control. The porch light cast a hard line across the floor, dividing shadow from warmth. He stayed planted on the stoop, squared shoulders, feet set apart. Control, he reminded himself, came from posture as much as words. Ma'am, he said again, louder now, I need to see some identification. The request came late, too late. Procedure mattered not just in what you did, but when you did it. Judge Carter didn't reach for her wallet. She folded her hands loosely at her waist instead, an almost judicial gesture, patient, deliberate. You haven't articulated reasonable suspicion, she said, and you haven't explained why you believe I'm involved in any criminal activity. Knox felt heat rise in his neck. The words sounded rehearsed to him like something pulled from a YouTube video or a protest pamphlet. He had heard variations before. They usually crumbled under pressure. He took a half step forward, boots creaking against the wood. We had a call, he said. Someone reported suspicious behavior. What behavior? She asked. Silence. The body camera recorded it cleanly, the pause, the faint static of the radio clipped to his shoulder. Dispatch codes scrolled through his mind, but none of them filled the gap. He hadn't asked. He hadn't needed to. Not usually. Ma'am, he said, frustration now coding every syllable. This is a lawful investigative stop. Her eyes didn't narrow. They didn't harden. They sharpened. An investigative detention requires specific, articulable facts, she replied. That's Terry v. Ohio. You can't detain someone in their own home base on an uncorroborated call and a hunch. The names landed heavier than any raised voice could have. Knox felt something unfamiliar. A subtle loss of footing, not fear. Disorientation. This wasn't how encounters were supposed to go. Citizens didn't cite Supreme Court precedent. They complied or they escalated. This was something else entirely. He straightened, defaulting to hierarchy. You need to step outside while I conduct my investigation. I am not required to exit my home absent a warrant or exigent circumstances, she said calmly. Do you have either? The camera caught his jaw working. The words exigent circumstances echoed in his head, half remembered from the academy. Fire, screams, immediate danger. None of it applied. The house behind her was quiet, lived in, unthreatening. You're obstructing, he said finally. The accusation sounded thin even to him. Judge Carter tilted her head slightly, not in challenge, but in something closer to disappointment. Asking you to follow the Constitution is not obstruction, she said. If you believe otherwise, call your supervisor. The suggestion struck him like an insult. Calling a supervisor meant admitting uncertainty. It meant the scene had slipped beyond his control. His pride bristled against the idea, pushing him forward instead of back. I don't need to call anyone, he snapped. I'm handling this. From somewhere down the block, a car door slammed. A dog barked once, then fell silent. The world kept moving. Indifferent to the slow fracture happening on the porch, Judge Carter inhaled, steadying herself. Officer, she said, voice still measured, I am a United States District Judge. I preside over Fourth Amendment cases. You are exceeding your authority. For a split second, something like doubt flickered across Knox's face. The title landed differently than a name would have. Judge, the word carried weight even outside a courtroom. He searched her expression for a crack arrogance bluff anything he could. Seize on. Instead, he saw certainty, not superiority. Certainty. He shook his head, defensive reflex kicking in. That does matter, he said. Everyone's the same under the law. The irony went unacknowledged. If that were true, she replied softly. This conversation would be very different. Knox reached for his radio, thumb hovering over the push to talk. His voice came out clipped. Official dispatch. Send a second unit to my location. The words shifted the gravity of the moment. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was becoming a record. As he waited, the porch light hummed faintly overhead. The red camera light blinked on and off. Patient, impartial. Judge Carter did. To move. She did. To retreat inside or step forward. She simply stood where the law said she could stand. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the night, distant at first. Then, unmistakable, Knox squared his shoulders again, bracing himself. What had begun as a knock was now something else entirely institutional. The footage traveled faster than anyone involved expected. By morning, it was already copied, time-stamped, and logged into the department's evidence management system. Not shared, not leaked, just processed quietly, methodically by a civilian technician who had no stake in rank or reputation. The clip was tagged with an internal case number and routed to internal affairs before Officer Knox finished his first cup of station coffee in a windowless review room on the third floor. Supervisors watched the encounter in silence. The body cam, as wide lens flattened the porch into a distorted stage, edge curved, voices slightly hollow. But the essentials were unmistakable. The knock, the command, the pause where justification should have lived. They rewind frame by frame. Pause it there. One lieutenant said, leaning forward. The screen froze on Judge Carter's face, calm and unflinching. What is the basis? No one answered. Policy manuals lay open on the table, pages flagged with neon tabs. Use of authority investigative detentions. Stop and identify perimeters. The language was precise, unforgiving. Reasonable suspicion required articulation. Commands inside a private residence required more than a hunch. The red light blinking on the screen felt accusatory now, not dramatic, just present. Downstairs, Knox sat in an interview room with union counsel beside him. Fingers laced so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. A recorder clicked on. The internal affairs investigator slid a form across the table. Before we begin, she said evenly, this is a compelled administrative interview under GIDI. Your statements can be used criminally, but failure to answer can result in termination. Do you understand? He nodded, swallowing hard. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air. He'd replayed the encounter in his head all night, sanding down the sharp edges, telling himself it hadn't been that bad, that she had escalated, that he had maintained control. The camera disagreed. They played the audio back to him, not the video, just sound. His own voice, stripped of posture and uniform, sounded harsher than he remembered. The pause is louder. The justification's thinner. Why did you ask dispatch for more information? The investigator asked. I did think it was necessary, he said. Why not? He hesitated. Training answers lined up in his head, but none of them matched the recording based on my experience. She wrote something down. The pen scratched softly, final sounding. As the questions continued, Knox felt the slow erosion of certainty. Each answer opened another gap. Each gap widened under scrutiny. He realized with a sinking clarity that instinct, once his shield, was now his liability. Across town, in an office lined with law books and soft light, Judge Carter sat with her clerk, reviewing the same footage. She watched it once, then again, not with satisfaction, with resolve. "This isn't about me," she said quietly. "It were I'd direct myself from the system entirely." She drafted a memorandum that afternoon, her language precise and restrained. No objectives wasted. She cited timestamps, quoted the officer verb. Reference settled doctrine Piton v. New York, Florida v. Jardines. "The Constitution," she wrote, "does not dim at the doorstep." The department's review moved quickly but not hastily. A use of authority board convened. Training officers weighed in. A captain noted the failure to de-escalate. Another pointed to the absence of exigent circumstances. The union argued stress, ambiguity, officer safety. The video kept playing. Memory softened nothing. The camera never blinked. By day 3, Knox was placed on administrative leave, pending outcome. His badge and weapon were logged, not ceremonially, just recorded and stored. He drove home in silence. Uniform folded on the passenger seat like a relic from another life. At night, he dreamed of the porch light, the way it split the world into shadow and exposure. The department issued a preliminary finding. Policy violation sustained. Discipline recommended. But the file didn't stop there because some lines once crossed don't belong to departments anymore. A copy of the case was forwarded to the U.S. Attorney's office under standard protocol for potential civil rights violations. No announcement, no press release, just a secure transfer and a new case number. Federal. Knox learned about it from his lawyer, not his command. The word landed heavier than any reprimand could have. Federal meant statutes. Federal meant precedent. Federal meant consequences that reach beyond suspension and retraining. Judge Carter received the notification the same afternoon. She closed her laptop slowly, exhaled, and looked out the window. Justice, she knew, was not fast. It was procedural. It moved on paper and patience. The camera done its job. Now the law would do the rest. The courtroom did not look like justice the way movies promised it would. There were no shafts of dramatic sunlight, no hushed gasps, no theatrical pauses, just fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead, beige walls scrubbed of personality, and the steady rhythm of procedure. Courtroom 3B filled slowly each morning, jurors filing in with coffee cups, attorneys arranging binders with practiced precision, a court reporter testing keys like a pianist warming up. Officer Daniel Knox sat at the defense table in a suit. Addend, he quite fit his shoulders anymore. The uniform had given him shape. This gave him none. His hands rested flat on the table, palms down as if grounding himself against drift. He avoided looking at the gallery. Across the aisle, federal prosecutors moved without urgency. They didn't need it. Their case was not emotional. It was architectural. The charge was read plainly. Deprivation of rights under color of Law Title 8, Haine, United States Code, Section 5th. And the word sounded clinical, almost bloodless. But everyone in the room understood their weight. This wands tea about discourtesy. It was about power misused where restraint was required. The prosecution opened without flourish. No raised voice, no moral lecture, just facts arranged in order. At 9:16 p.m., the assistant U.S. attorney said the defendant initiated contact without reasonable suspicion. At 97, he issued commands unsupported by law. At 9:18, he escalated without cause. Time became the backbone of the case. They called the dispatcher first. She testified about the call, its vagueness, the absence of a description, the lack of corroboration. Then a training sergeant took the stand, flipping calmly through a departmental manual. He read aloud the section on investigative detentions, his voice steady, almost bored. Officers must articulate specific objective facts, he said. Instinct alone is insufficient. When the body cam footage played, the room went still, not tense, attentive. The video did what it always did. It refused interpretation. It showed the knock, the command, the pause, the absence where justification should have been. Judge Carter's voice calm, precise, cut through the speaker system with surgical clarity. Knox shifted in his chair, eyes fixed on the table. The defense rose with a different rhythm. They spoke of stress, of late shifts, of uncertainty in a world that punished hesitation. They argued intent that Knox hadn't he meant to violate anyone as right, that he believed he was acting lawfully in a fluid situation, split-second decision. The defense attorney repeated, palms open, human judgment under pressure. On cross-examination, the prosecutor, did he argue? She asked, what crime did you suspect? I could be sure, Knox said. What behavior indicated criminal activity? I relied on my experience doing what? Silence stretched thin, then snapped. She did raise her voice. She did need to. Each question tightened the frame until only the facts fit inside it. Judge Carr testified last. She did not speak as a judge. She spoke as a resident, a citizen, a woman standing in her own doorway. I asked for the legal basis, she said evenly. None was given. No embellishment, no anger, just record. Closing arguments were brief. The prosecution reminded the jury that the Constitution was most vulnerable in ordinary moments at doors, on sidewalks, in quiet neighborhoods. The defense asked for grace, for understanding, for recognition of difficulty. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was delivered without drama. Guilty. Knox felt it not as shock, but as confirmation. The room did. Tea erupt. There were no cheers. The fluorescent lights buzzed on indifferent. Sentencing came weeks later. The judge, another judge, one who had no connection to the case beyond the law, spoke carefully. She cited precedent. She acknowledged service. Then she addressed harm. Authority, she said, is not diminished by restraint. It is defined by it. The sentence was read. 10 years. It landed heavy, not loud. Knox closed his eyes. Somewhere behind him, a chair shifted, paper rustled. Life moved on even as it stopped. Judge Carter watched without satisfaction. Accountability did not feel like victory. It felt like gravity, inevitable, exhausting. As the marshal led Knox away, the courtroom emptied slowly. No one lingered. Justice once delivered did not ask to be admired. It only asked to be remembered. The news cycle moved on before the ink dried on the judgment. There were no nightly panels dissecting the sentence, no looping clips with dramatic music. The story appeared in the middle pages, below elections, above weather, reduced to a headline and a mug shot that barely resembled the man it once represented. A career ended with a line of text, 10 years federal custody. Case closed, but systems do not close the way cases do. Inside the department, the sentence landed with a thud that echoed through hallways built for routine. Roll call rooms grew quieter. Jokes fell flat. Supervisors spoke more carefully, choosing words that wouldn't be replayed later. The training division received a memo marked immediate revision required, a bureaucratic phrase that carried the weight of consequence. The first change came quietly. Dispatch protocols were rewritten so vague calls could no longer drift unchallenged into enforcement. Suspicious activity now required clarification. Who, what, where, doing what. Operators were instructed to ask twice if necessary. Ambiguity was no longer a green light. Then came training. Not the theatrical kind. No shouting instructors or dramatic reenactments. Just rooms with chairs, policy binders, and uncomfortable silence. Officers watched the footage again, not to shame, but to study. Instructors paused the video at the same moment every time. The pause where justification should have lived. What's missing here? They asked. No one answered at first. Bias interruption modules followed, mandated by consent decree rather than goodwill. Officers learned to name assumptions before acting on them, to slow down, to narrate. Their reasoning out loud, not for supervisors, but for themselves. The Constitution, the trainers reminded them, was not a suggestion. It was muscle memory. Across town in a different building with darker wood and heavier air, Judge Evelyn Carter stood before her colleagues at a judicial conference. Her remarks were brief, measured. Unusual the law held, she said, but it hailed because it was documented. She spoke about cameras not as surveillance, but as witnesses, about procedure not as bureaucracy, but as protection. She did not mention race directly. She did not need to. Everyone in the room understood the spaces between her sentences. Later, she issued a written reflection rare for a sitting federal judge. It was not an opinion. It was a reminder. Rights, she wrote, are most vulnerable in moments that feel ordinary. The porch, the knock, the assumption. Officer Knox entered federal custody on a gray morning without ceremony. No cameras waited. No statements were made. The gates closed behind him with a mechanical finality that fit louder than any verdict. Inside, time reorganized itself into counts and routines. The authority he once carried dissolved into rules he could not negotiate. At night, he replayed the moment he wished he had paused. The half-second where he could have asked a question instead of issuing a command, the place where pride had spoken louder than law. The realization did not come with redemption. It came with exhaustion. Back on the street where it began. The house at 1427 looked the same, fresh paint on the trim, porch light replaced. The neighborhood had absorbed the event the way neighborhoods always do by continuing. One evening, months later, Judge Carter stood on that same porch as dusk settled in. Not for a statement, not for memory, just air. The light clicked on automatically soft and steady. She watched it pull on the wood. Thought briefly of timestamps and transcripts, then let the thought pass. Justice had not felt triumphant. It had felt procedural, layered, slow. It had required clerks and technicians and dispatchers who asked better questions. It had required supervisors willing to document failure instead of defending it. It had required a system strong enough to indict one of its own, and tired enough to change afterward. The question it left behind was not simple, and it was not rhetorical. How many doors had opened this way without cameras watching? How many commands had gone unquestioned? Because no one on either side knew the law well enough or felt safe enough to pause. The porch light hummed softly in the dark. Inside the house was quiet. Outside the street held its breath, ordinary and unresolved. Justice, when it finally arrived, did not announce itself.